President Trump wants Senate Republicans to get rid of the filibuster, and the White House plans to cap the number of refugees allowed into the United States. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. The federal government shutdown is more than a month old. Republican and Democratic lawmakers remain far apart over a spending bill that could end the shutdown. President Trump is calling on Republican senators to get rid of the Senate's filibuster procedure. Writing online, he says Republicans should pass the spending legislation over Democrats' objections. GOP senators have previously opposed dumping the filibuster. They say it is a tool that protects them if Democrats regain power in the Senate. The shutdown means that federal funding for food assistance will evaporate tomorrow. More than 40 million Americans will be affected by the loss of SNAP benefits. In Kansas and Missouri, about 800,000 people are at risk. From member station KCUR, Kotar Shire reports it's also a problem for small, urban core grocery stores.
The National Grocers Association says SNAP accounts for 12% of all grocery sales nationwide. At the Happy Foods in Kansas City, manager Chris Cavadas says a majority of his business comes from SNAP. The store has been there since the 50s, and Cavadas says some families have been shopping there since it opened.
You get to know them, they're friends, they're not just a customer, they become friends.
He also says cutting off SNAP couldn't have come at a worse time. Normally, he would be stocking the store for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but he says he's had to cut way back on ordering. For NPR News, I'm Kotar Shire in Kansas City.
Republicans want Democrats to vote for a spending bill in Congress to reopen the federal government. Democrats say Republicans need to restore enormous cuts to federal health care programs, such as the Affordable Care Act. Starting tomorrow, people using the ACA will see what their new premiums will cost next year. For many, the premiums will more than double. Julie Rovner of KFF says consolidation in the healthcare industry is also driving up costs.
We've seen what we call this vertical consolidation, where insurers are buying doctor practices and pharmacy benefit managers, and all the people who are supposed to provide the checks and balances are now all under one umbrella, and that enables them to basically have monopoly prices. That was something that the Federal Trade Commission was actually working on, and that's been pretty much stopped under the Trump administration.
That's Julie Rovner of KFF. The Trump administration has alarmed refugee advocacy groups. As NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports, it's because the administration has set the lowest refugee cap in U.S. history and says it will accept mostly white South Africans.
In a notice in the Federal Registry, the Trump administration says it will cap the number of refugees to 7,500 this fiscal year, and most of those spots are for Afrikaners, white South Africans. The International Rescue Committee calls this an historic retreat at a time when global displacement has reached record levels. Another group that helps to resettle Afghan allies says Trump is effectively shutting the door on Afghans who risk their lives to help the U.S. during the war there. A Trump administration official tells NPR that no refugees will be admitted until there are consultations with Congress, and that's held up by the government shutdown. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee is furious with the Trump administration. Virginia Senator Mark Warner says the Trump administration is deliberately cutting Democratic lawmakers out of information about U.S. military strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific Ocean. The Trump administration says, without providing evidence, it's targeting drug smuggling. The top UN human rights chief is now saying these U.S. strikes are unacceptable and must stop. A slim majority of the Republican-led Senate has voted to end President Trump's emergency tariffs program. But NPR's Claudia Grisales reports the Republican-led House is not expected to take up this effort.
The series of 3 votes this week amounted to a test for Senate Republicans divided over the president's emergency tariffs in Brazil, Canada, and around the globe. Despite passage, the resolutions are not expected to get a vote in the House. Speaker Mike Johnson earlier this year installed a rules change to block resolutions challenging the president's tariffs authority from reaching the House floor. Even so, President Trump would veto the measure if it reached his desk. Earlier this week, Vice President J.D. Vance lobbied Republican senators to vote no, but a handful were not convinced. Kentucky's Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, Maine's Susan Collins, and Alaska's Lisa Murkowski defected to vote with Democrats. Claudia Salis, NPR News, the Capitol.
A federal judge has ruled the Food and Drug Administration illegally put restrictions on people trying to get an abortion medication. The judge, ruling from Hawaii, says the FDA wrongly put restrictions on people seeking access to mifepristone without providing a scientific reason. Big tech companies OpenAI and Oracle have announced a massive $7 billion data center in Michigan. It will power artificial intelligence. NPR's Bobby Allen reports this comes as fears grow that investment in AI is fueling a bubble.
ChatGPT maker OpenAI and software giant Oracle say a 250-acre data center will start construction next year outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's the latest Silicon Valley investment to meet the demand of new AI services, which require immense energy. The data center boom in the U.S. is placing strain on local power grids and water systems as the always-on computer networks suck up energy and have to be cooled to avoid overheating. The newly announced $7 billion data center in Michigan stoked new investor fears that companies are pumping billions into a technology that has not proven to meet the promise of its backers. A new state law in Michigan exempts AI data centers from paying sales and use taxes. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
Britain's King Charles has stripped his younger brother Andrew of all his royal titles. Charles is also evicting Andrew from his taxpayer-supported royal residence. This follows a series of revelations about Andrew's friendship with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. NPR's Lauren Frayer has more from London.
In a terse 3-paragraph statement, Buckingham Palace says these, quote, censures are deemed necessary, even though Andrew denies the allegations against him. This week, Parliament questioned why Andrew was living rent-free in a 30-room royal lodge. Now he's moving to a private residence and will be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor without any titles. This is one of the most dramatic moves against a member of the royal family in modern British history. It comes after one of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers wrote in a posthumous memoir that she had sex with Andrew, too, when she was 17. And after photos emerged of Andrew hosting Epstein and now convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein together at Andrew's daughter's 18th birthday party. Lauren Frayer, NPR News, London.
I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News.